convoluted that I've had to add a class for it because nobody can quite seem to follow along here. So we're going to spend a little time today going over that. So turn to page 6 of the agreement, paragraph 12. And it states, buyer's due diligence for inspections, the rights and the responsibility. Seller will provide access to insurers, representatives, and, as may be required by this agreement or by mortgage lender, to surveyors, municipal officers, appraisers, and inspectors. In addition, unless otherwise agreed, only parties and their real estate licensees may attend any inspection. That was recently added. Why do you think that last sentence has been recently added? Well, I'll help you out with that. It's been added because for many, many years, buyers found it an opportunity to bring all of the family through to take a look at their new home. And I understand they're excited and it's a wonderful thing, but this is not when the 3 grandchildren are supposed to be running through and Aunt Lucy needs help up the steps. And no, that's not what this is about. This is about the opportunity for the buyer to do their due diligence in having an inspection done or appraiser come in and whatever needs to be done. It's eating up time that is needed to do the job. So they actually had to add in here that it is limited to the licensee may attend the inspection and only the parties in the real estate transaction, okay? Remind your buyers of that because remember I tell you they jibber jabber a lot and you're going to hear, oh my God, I'm going to bring my mom and I'm going to bring my, no, you're not going to bring them, no, Okay, so nip it in the bud right at the beginning. Buyer may make 2 pre-settlement walkthrough inspections of the property for the limited purpose of determining that the condition of the property is as required by the agreement and any addenda. Buyer's rights to these inspections will not be waived by any other provision of the agreement. What provision of the agreement might they be speaking of that states it's not waived by any other provision of this agreement? How about the as-is provision? Those of you who took my agreement of sale class this month know that, oh, surprise, on the last page we read in bold letters, property being sold in as-is condition. Every property is sold in its as-is condition. I know, everybody thinks they got to rewrite that sentence, but they don't. It's already in there, okay? That's why there's a due diligence period, because the property is being sold in its as-is condition. Even though a property is being sold in its as-is condition, buyers still have a right to do additional walkthroughs post executed agreement of sale. Okay, now, seller will have the heat and all utilities, including fuel, on for all inspections and appraisals. This is a really important sentence, and you'll note it's been darkened because it's important. They want you to pay attention. Some of you are working with investors who are buying properties in poor condition. Sometimes poor condition properties or grandmom houses, the family has opted, or the owner, to shut the water off, shut the electric, shut the heat off, whatever the case may be. For those reasons, that's why this is written in here. If you're working with buyers and the MLS says, bring a flashlight, not recommending showings at night, bring a drill, because you got to get the plywood off the door. Telltale signs, there is no running water, electricity, or gas on. If it's a grandmom house, it's livable, but the utilities may be off. So if you're having an inspection done, the inspector can only do half their job. Now there's a cost to have the inspector come back to finish the job, check the heat, check the air if there is, the gas range, the electric range, the refrigerator. All of these things can't be checked if there's no utilities on. Be careful. If you do your walkthrough and there are no utilities on, your buyer says, okay, this is the one, write it up. You're going to have to indicate in the agreement of sale the changing of times. Oh, grandmom is a new term for me. Ooh, interesting. Grandmom house is an older home, kitchen replaced maybe 40, 50 years ago, but it's quite functional. It's been well maintained. She's had it painted when it needed. She had, the drippy faucet fixed when it was broken, but she's living off of Social Security. So we didn't do anything crazy. We got 50-year-old windows. We might have a 50-year-old boiler. We might have a 25-year-old water heater, but they're functioning. You could actually walk in and live in this house. That's a grandmom house. I hope that helps. Okay, so in your agreement of sale, when you're dealing with a property that does not have utilities on, you must make sure your timing, and we're going to talk about that on paragraph 13, when it's all about timing, that you indicate a longer inspection period. You're also going to have to reiterate on the last page that the property is to have all utilities on before any inspections are to begin. Be careful. Remember, realtors smell green. I keep telling you this. As soon as you get on the telephone, they know you don't know what the hell you're talking about. With that, they're going to do the old, oh, honey, that's the buyer's job. Yeah, the buyer's got to do that. No, you need to know where these little clues are. Okay? So there it is for you. You need to know that paragraph 12.3 indicates that it is the seller's responsibility to have these on. All inspections, including home inspectors, are authorized by the buyer to provide a copy of any inspection report to the broker for the buyer. That's you guys. I don't need the report. Seller has a right, upon request, to receive a free copy of any inspection report from the party for whom it was prepared, unless otherwise stated. Underline this line. Seller does not have the right to receive a copy of the lender's appraisal report. The appraisal is only for the buyer and the loan institution, right? Because it was their appraiser who went out to appraise the property. Now, that same listing agent who knows you're green because they could smell it are going to do one of these. Vic, I know the appraiser was out. I didn't see the appraisal report. Can you send that to me, please? Thanks. No, we're not entitled to it. Make sure you don't fall for that one. Now, there is an exception. If the property does not appraise, it comes in under purchase price or whatever particulars there may be attached to this if there was an appraisal contingency. I've seen appraisal contingencies based on a percentage. So there's variable ways of doing that. But if it does not come in a value, however the value is determined, then the listing agent will then receive the appraisal. Listen, an appraisal is that of an opinion, just like home inspections. You could have 3 home inspectors do a property, which I did many years ago, and every time I read each of the home inspections, you would think I was talking about 3 different properties. That's how variable they can be. Yes, there are guidelines on how an appraiser comes to the conclusion of their pricing. Unfortunately, we have had appraisers far from the city of Philadelphia come in. Reading, Lancaster, they just don't get Philadelphia. And their comps make absolutely no sense to us because we function differently in the city. So at that point, that it has happened, and there have been cases won when an appraisal has been challenged. So if an appraisal comes in undervalued, yes, the seller and the seller's agent are completely entitled to receiving that, so they can review the comps and how the calculations were done on the appraiser. Okay? Next, buyer waives or elects the buyer's expense to have the following inspections, certifications, and investigations, referred to as inspection and or inspections, performed by a professional contractor, home inspector, engineer, architect, or other properly licensed or qualified professional. All inspections shall be now non-invasive unless otherwise agreed to. If the same inspector is inspecting more than one system, the inspector must comply with the home inspection law. Notice for regarding property and environmental inspections. A couple things on that last paragraph. What might be an invasive inspection that we are frequently seeing done in this type of market and time of selling real estate? What might be something? Oh, stucco. Stucco is not our friend. No. You know, it had a place many years ago. You know, when I still work with buyers, I list properties. I run Screaming in the Woods if it has stucco on it, other than the old time stucco. The stucco that was put on 30, 40 years ago. It was done by hand with a trowel, a mason guy. It was done way different, you know, than stucco today. So yes, stucco is totally invasive. Yes, not invasive, evasive. It's, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the end here in regards to the elected inspections that we're going to do. For elected inspections, buyer will, within the contingency period stated in paragraph 13A, so we haven't gotten there yet, 13 deals with time. This is what has to happen with the designated time we decide. 10 days for this conversation is a typically found number that we would put in 13. So within those 10 days, if we're going to use them as an example for today, within the 10 days, we have to A, complete the inspection, obtain an inspection report or results, referred to as report or reports, and accept the property, terminate the agreement, or submit a written corrective proposal to the seller according to the terms of paragraph 13B. So we have 10 days to get those things done. Hire the inspector, do the inspection, decide if you're going to make a wish list, make the wish list to the seller, and get it over to the seller within 10 days. Now, let's see what we can elect here to do. First one is home property inspections and environmental hazards. Buyer may conduct an inspection of the property, structure components, such as roof, exterior windows, exterior door, exterior building material, fascia, gutter and downspouts, swimming pools, hot tubs and spas, appliances, electrical systems, interior, exterior plumbing, public sewer systems. I'm not so sure about the public sewer system, but heating and cooling systems, water penetration, electromagnetic fields, wetland and floodplain delineation, structural square footage. Who? Name me the professionals that it only coming from these professionals count for the accuracy of structural square footage. Does anybody know? Appraiser, very good. Who else? Architect, and of course the assessor, how they determine it when the property was built and or if they had to come back out again. mold and other environmental hazards, fungi, indoor air quality, asbestos, underground storage tanks, and any other item buyer may select. If buyer elects to have the home inspection of the property, as defined in the home inspection law, the home inspection must be performed by a full member in good standings of a National Home Inspection Association or a person supervised by a full member of the National Home Inspection Association in accordance with the ethical standards and code of conduct or practice of that association, or by a properly licensed and registered engineer or architect. Okay? Can't have Uncle Joe doing this. We've talked about this before. I know your buyer wants Uncle Joe there. He's been so fabulous. He supported me ever since Daddy died. He built this beautiful house up the mountains. It's just gorgeous. He did it himself. I mean, I don't know what I would have done without Uncle Joe. You getting the scenario how this is going down? Listen, Uncle Joe can't do the inspection, but could bend the rules a little bit. And how about we have Uncle Joe come to the home inspection with you, Ms. Buyer? Single woman, first house, all of those anxieties. How about we bring Uncle Joe so that it's going to make you feel better, and Uncle Joe can see what you're buying, and he can bring up questions and ask the home inspector, right? Okay. Wood infestation. Buyer may obtain a written wood-destroying insect infestation inspection report from an inspector qualified as a wood-destroying pesticide applicator, and will deliver it and all supporting documents and drawings provided by the inspector to the seller. The report is to be made satisfactory and in compliance with the applicable laws, mortgage lender requirements. Now, if this is an FHA VA transaction, and the buyer has made a decision here to elect line 343, they are mandated to follow through with that. That loan institution is going to be looking for that report. If in a conventional loan, a buyer made a decision to elect to have the termite done and chose not to, that will not, to my understanding, be a condition for the mortgage lender. But let me say this. A buyer's an ass if they're not doing wood-destroying insects. We, Philadelphia, are sandwiched between what?
Two rivers.
Thank you, Ron. Two rivers. We are wet as wet can get. Parts of Bucks County are extremely wet. Any of you who've ever sold business in Bucks County realize that some pumps are everywhere. And I'll tell you, in the 80s and 90s, it was so typical to build a home in Bucks County. You built the home on what is known as, oh my God, it just went out of my head. Oi.
Superfund?
Nope. We built it with a floating slab.
Oh, okay.
Floating slab construction, which means in the basement we had poured concrete, and the poured concrete went to all ends of the foundation, except it didn't meet the foundation. There was probably approximately a 6-inch gap between where the floor stopped. There would be stone in a trench, and then the foundational wall. Because the water table is so high in parts of Bucks County that it would actually have to come up, and it would come up through the trough around the perimeter of the property, being tipped to a sump pump and then discharged out. So a floating slab construction was very popular for 20, 25 years of construction in Bucks County. So we're high water. Wood infestation loves damp. Oh, they just love noshing on that damp wood. So buyers are an ass if they don't do it. You know, doesn't happen too often. But on occasion, you're going to have somebody who's quite fabulous. They're going to tell you they're fabulous. And I don't need that. Well, the answer is yes, you do. You go right back at them and say, no, you're incorrect on this. You do need it. For a few $100s, you must have this done. So push the point. It also then says, the inspection is to be limited to all readily visible and accessible areas of all structure of the property, except fencing. If the inspection reveals infestation, buyer, at buyer's expense, may obtain a proposal from a wood-destroying pesticide applicator to treat the property. If the inspection reveals damage from active or previous infestation, buyer may obtain a written report from a professional contractor, home inspector, or structural engineer that is limited to the structural damage of the property caused by wood-destroying organisms and a proposal to repair the property. Okay, so if we've got some bumps and bruises, we need to find out how intense those bumps and bruises are from the infestation. Because a joist has had infestation does not necessarily mean the integrity of the joist itself has been compromised. Okay? Deed restrictions and zoning. Buyer may investigate easements, deed and use restrictions, including any historical preservational restrictions or ordinances that may apply to the property. Now, realtors are lazy. I don't know what to do with you people. So, interesting FYI. Because a property is not 200 years old does not mean it doesn't have a historical preservational restriction to it. When you go into public records on a particular property, I want you to scroll down, and on the right-hand side, it will indicate if the property has a historical preservational restrictions to it. The property could have been built in the 70s, but because it's built in an area, i.e., such as Old City, Society Hill, they placed a restriction on the style of the home, and it may have it attached to it. So you always have to check. When you're going to write an offer, you need to pull up the public record and start there. Look and see if there is a historical preservational restrictions attached to it. And if you have doubt, call in Philadelphia, the historical society there, and find out if this particular address has any restrictions on it. Water's, yeah. Okay, water service. Buyer may obtain an inspection from for quality and quantity of water system from a properly licensed or otherwise qualified water well testing company. If and as required by the inspection company, seller at seller's expense will locate and provide access to the on-site or individual water system. Seller will restore the property to its previous condition at seller's expense prior to settlement. Now I'm going to share a little story with you under water service. So in Philadelphia, we have public water, right? The reality really is, though, that the buyer could hire a water inspection company, put a container under the faucet, take a sample, send it out to a laboratory to determine what is in their water. Have I ever seen that done? No. But probably about at least 10 years ago, maybe 15. It happened to me 3 times in 1 year. I'm at the home inspection, and it's an older property in Port Richmond. I say to my home inspector, Mr. Home Inspector, can you please tell me the material of the pipe coming into the house, the water line? What is the material of that pipe? Home inspector goes over, checks it, and comes back to me and says, that pipe is lead. Lead pipes still exist. As a practice, I now do this. If a property is 90 years or older, I recommend that my buyers initial off water service. Here's why. On that same example, I got home and called the listing agent and said to her, listen, I needed an extension of time for my home inspection. She said, why? What's the matter? I said, well, we found out today that the pipe coming into the home, bringing in the water, the intake pipe, is lead. And there was a moment of hesitation. And she said to me, oh, yeah, but you didn't elect to check off water system. So I said to her, yes, you know what, you're right. But lead is a serious health problem. So therefore, that's going to supersede this, and you're going to have to allow me to have this water now inspected. Oh, she said, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I got the extension. Everything I just uttered to her was probably a fib. But I said it really good, and she bought it. I don't know how good the rest of you are. With that said,
Excuse me, Vic, could you say that again? What you said to the other agent?
what I said to her was, yep, you're right. It is a lead pipe, but lead is a poison and a health hazard. Therefore, we're going to have EPA representative come out here, test the water to confirm if lead is in the water. It's a safety hazard. We have to do this. I said it as a matter of fact. I didn't ask permission. I just said, this is what we're doing. And it sounded good to her ears. And she said, yep, you know what? You're right. But I learned a lesson from that. If a property is 90 years or over, for me, this is how I do business. I encourage my buyers to initial off on that, because if we run into lead, I don't need another agent coming back to me saying, yeah, but you didn't check that off. Yep, covered my dupa every which way but Sunday. You will have to go back, though, if there is, to get an extension, because it's going to take an additional 10 to 12 days to have an EPA certified company. And please make sure it must be an EPA certified laboratory to come out, take a sample of the water, and get the results back from. Okay? So, just a little trick, something to think of. Radon. Buyer may obtain a radon test from a property from a certified inspector. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, known as EPA, advises corrective action if the average annual exposure to radon is equal to or higher than 0.02 working liters or 4 picocuriers, which is what I'm accustomed to, that measurement. Radon is a natural radioactive gas that is produced by the ground by the normal decay of uranium and radium. Studies indicate that extended exposure to high levels of radon gas can increase the risk of lung cancer. Radon can find its way into air spaces and can permeate a structure. If any person who tests, mitigates, or safeguards a building for radon in Pennsylvania must be certified by the Department of Environmental Protections. Information about radon and about certification, testing, and mitigation firms are available through the Department of Environmental Protection Agency. So, let me say this. Oh gosh, Ron's got his mic on. Anyway, if you're listening to your clients and you're listening to their jibber jabber, if they ever mention to you that they're planning on converting the lower level, subcranial level, into a living space and or sleeping area, two things must keep in mind. One,
can you move me up to
do a radon. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to mute him. I'm sorry. I apologize. Oh, somebody did it for me. Thank you. Okay, so you must do a radon test, right? Because your buyers don't know enough to know they don't even know. You got to say to them, wait a minute. You can't put Johnny down here and make this a living space unless we do a radon test. That's long-term exposure. And Is there a second means of egress? This is a horrible thing I'm going to say. There's one staircase coming from that kitchen into that basement. If that staircase is on fire because we have a kitchen on fire, how is Johnny ever getting out? Johnny is going to be toast. Now you have to pay attention, people. You have to put fear in these buyers. This is really dangerous, very dangerous. So you must make sure there's a second means of egress and they do a radon. This actually happened to me with a client. He was going to put his son down there. And with that, I said, I looked across the basement. It had 9-foot ceilings. It was a big basement. I said, okay, he could do this. And there's a second means of egress. There was a doorway at the end of the basement that opened up to concrete stairways that allowed him to go to the backyard. So I was like, okay, he can get out of here. God forbid there's a fire. And number two, I said, well, then you have to do radon. And he was like, oh my God, Vic, you're a pain. I said, yeah, I know I'm a pain. But for $300, you're going to do it. Well, sure enough, it popped hot. So radon is extremely erratic. It doesn't care where it lives. Keeping in mind that the plates of the earth are constantly shifting, there are, though, certain veins that run in the city, Roxborough, Manayunk, Wash West. Any of these places can often pop hot. I sold a new construction in Holland. It was the sample home. It was the last one to go. And in the sample, the developer knew enough to know and had already installed all of the piping and the pit needed for the radon system if it should pop hot. We did a radon test, and it was the highest I have ever seen for me at 28.6. I never had a level that high. And so clearly, it wasn't difficult to add the mitigating system because the developer was smart and planned ahead of time, because Holland, PA, among many parts of Bucks County, have a very high levels of radon. So keep that in mind. Encourage that for your buyers. On-lot sewage. Buyer may obtain an inspection of an individual on-lot sewage disposal system, which may include hydraulic load testing from a qualified professional inspector. If and as required by the inspection company, seller at seller's expense will locate, provide access to, empty the individual on-lot disposal system, and provide all water needed unless otherwise agreed. Seller will restore the property to its previous condition at seller's expense prior to settlement. Property and flood insurance. Buyer may obtain or may determine the assurability of a property by making application for property and casualty insurance for the property to a reasonable insurer. Broker for the buyer, if any. Otherwise, broker for the seller may communicate with the insurer to assist in the insurance process. If the property is located in a specifically designated flood zone, buyer may be required to carry flood insurance at buyer's expense, which may be necessary and needed to be ordered 14 days or more prior to settlement. Revised flood maps and changes to federal laws may subsequently increase future flood insurance premiums and require insurance for formerly exempted properties. Buyers should consult with one or more flood insurance agents regarding the need for flood insurance and possible premium increases. Property boundaries. Buyer may engage the services of a surveyor, title abstractor, or other qualified professional to assist in the legal description, certainty, and location of boundaries and or quandaries of land. Most sellers have, and underline this, most sellers have not had the property surveyed, as it is not a requirement for property transfer in Pennsylvania. Any fences, hedges, walls, and other structural and natural barriers may or may not represent the true boundary lines of the property. Any numerical representation of size of the property or approximates are approximates only and may be inaccurate. Okay? Lead-based paint, before buyer is obligated to purchase a residential dwelling built prior to 1978. Buyer has the option to conduct a risk assessment and or inspections of the property for the presence of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards. Regardless of whether this inspection is elected or waived, the Residential Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act requires the seller of properties built prior to 1978 to provide the buyer with an EPA-approved lead hazard information pamphlet titled Protect Your Family from Lead in the Home, along with separate forms attached to the agreement, disclosing seller's knowledge of lead-based paint hazards and any lead-based paint recordings regarding the property. Now we have other. What might you add under other of types of inspection, certifications, other than these pre-printed? What might we add that we're going to let our seller know the buyer wants to do? Well, we spoke about stucco, right? So clearly we want to add the stucco because that is invasive. They drill holes around the perimeter of windows and doors to see if there's a moisture behind there. They then put a moisture meter back there, okay? How about you're thinking about dropping a camera down the sewer line? Yeah, I would add that. I will tell you this, I have learned. I will highly recommend, if I ever sell a property again to a buyer who is purchasing a rehab, contractors are just as lazy as realtors, and they wash all of their tools in the kitchen sink, and especially spackle goes down the sink, and then it dries and it becomes an obstruction. And 3 days after your buyer moves in, they're calling you because the basement is full of water. If you are selling a property that is a rehabbed property, highly encourage your buyers to have that sewer line scoped and cameraed, because rehabs, they're not generally replacing the sewer line. That sewer line could be 150 years old for all you know. Okay, so let's do a little homework on that one. Okay, now on line 406, there's probably less than 30 realtors in the city of Philadelphia who know what that sentence means and the purpose of line 406. 406 says the inspections elected above do not apply to the following existing conditions and or items. What the heck does that mean? Okay, what that means is this. If you are the listing agent and you've listed a property that's a grandmom house, an as-is house, a house that the seller says, I'm not doing anything. I'm not even changing the light bulb, okay? Get it straight. I'm not doing anything. And it's priced accordingly because it has a 50-year-old boiler, a 25-year-old water heater, and etc. 40-year-old windows. The listing agent and seller can write on line 407 and 408 those exact mechanicals. The heating, the plumbing, the electrical, the roofing, this, that, and the other. You could add in there. Does not apply to the following existing conditions. Yes, the buyer can do their inspection. No, the buyer can't come back and say, listen, by the way, the heater's 50 years old and I want it replaced. Nope. It's been priced accordingly. The water heater, I think, is getting a little leak. Nope. Not doing it. You need to know enough to know, representing a seller, when you've got a property like this, that you need to add that verbiage in those 2 lines. Have the seller initial it, and then that's got to go back to the buyer, because they need to know you know enough to know. Don't come back to me and say, I want this fix, this fix, this fix. Not doing it. Priced accordingly. Okay. D, notice regarding property and environmental inspections. It lists right off the get-go, exterior building material. Poor or improper installation of exterior building materials. Stucco, right? That's what it's speaking of. Asbestos, environmental hazards, wetland, mold, fungi, indoor air quality. Any of these additional things could be added, and then they give you additional information where to find some of the necessary research from EPA. Okay? All right, now, paragraph 13. Let's get started with this. Now, it says, the contingency period is blank. You'll see 10 has been written in there, and 10 is a very common number that is used. If not specified, from when? From the execution date of the agreement. If you've taken my classes, I tell you, when you get your executed agreement, you got to sit down and map out all these times. You write it on a calendar, you put it in a palm, you put it in some sort of articular, you do some sort of a computer mojo, whatever it is you do to make you aware when something is due, you're going to do this. From the execution date for each inspection elected in paragraph 12C. Well, 12C is all, 12 was all of those elections. Within the stated contingency period, and as the result of any inspection elected in 12C, except as stated in paragraph 13C. Now, remember, we're going to do 10 days. Execution date, let me see how many of you are on board here. Execution date was May the 1st. You wrote the offer on May the 28th. Everybody signed off on May the 1st. What is the last day that you can send over the buyer's wish list to the seller? Oh my God. Somebody talk to me here.
The 7th?
No. We have 10 days. 10 days is what we said. We said that the date was May the 1st was our execution date. I want you to use your fingers. Nobody gets it right unless they use their fingers. We do not count the day of execution.
The 11th.
Thank you. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. See how valuable these little things are? You got to use them. You start the day after the execution date. Okay. This will get you in court every single time. Do not screw up on these dates. If the result of the inspection elected in 12C are satisfactory to the buyer, buyer will present all reports in their entirety to the seller and accept the property with the information stated in the report and agree to release in paragraph 28 of the agreement. Buyer gets the report back. They're like, stupid little bumps and bruises. I'm not worrying about it. We're taking the property. Fabulous. Okay. Seller gets the report. Buyer accepts the property. Number 2. If the results of the inspection elected in paragraph 12C is unsatisfactory to the buyer will present all reports in their entirety to the seller and terminate this agreement with written notice to the seller, with all deposit monies returning to the buyer according to the terms of paragraph 26 of this agreement. Or, if the results of the inspections elected in paragraph 12C are unsatisfactory to the buyer will present all reports in their entirety to the seller with a written corrective proposal listing corrections and or credits desired by the buyer. The proposal may, but is not required to, include the name of the properly licensed and qualified professionals to perform the corrections requested in the proposal, provisions for payment, including retesting, and a projected date for completion of the corrections. Buyer can ask the seller to pay for the contractors that the buyer wants to have to do the work. A lot of people don't realize that. It's always, oh my God, the seller's going to get some goofball to do this. No, in your proposal, and it's electrical, you could say, I want Jack Flash Electric to do this at the cost of the seller. Okay? Buyer agrees that seller will not be held liable for corrections that do not comply with the mortgage lender or government requirements if performed in a workmanlike manner. I hate that. In a workmanlike manner. Who the hell says workmanlike? What is workmanlike manner? It's very gray. The agreement has a lot of gray places, and here's one of them. I don't know who determines that. According to the terms of the buyer's proposal. All right, now, we've done our home inspection. We decided we're making a wish list. We created the wish list to keep dates simple because it becomes then complex. All of our dates are based at the end of the contingency period. More and more buyer agents are not turning over their wish list to the seller until the last day, the 10th day. It keeps timing a lot easier because if you turn it in early, it gives additional time for the seller who now has 5 days to respond. It gives them more time to respond. So to keep your life simple and to try to keep your days straight, turn in your wish list to the seller on the 10th day. Day 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, the seller has to respond. And then it says, okay, here we go. Following the end of the contingency period, buyer and seller will have 5 days, if not specified, for a negotiating period. During the negotiating period, seller will acknowledge in writing seller's agreement to satisfy all terms of the buyer's proposal. Sellers have 4 choices. Here they go. First choice, seller says, Jiminy Christmas, I didn't even know A, B, and C were broken. Oh, honey, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care and fix A, B, and C for you. Yay. Or the seller can say, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll fix A and B, but I'm not fixing C. Or maybe the seller's going to say, I'm not fixing anything. Or maybe the seller's going to say, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to fix it, but I'm going to give you a monetary credit. I'm going to throw some money at this problem, and then you fix it. There are the 4 options a seller has. Seller will acknowledge in writing seller's agreement to satisfy all the terms of buyer's proposal. So that means the seller's a great guy. He's going to fix everything. Yay! Or buyer and seller will negotiate another mutual acceptable written agreement, providing for any repairs or improvements to the property and or credit to the buyer at settlement as acceptable to a mortgage lender. The last part of that sentence, as acceptable to a mortgage lender, is important if you are dealing with seller's assist. Any monetary credit to a buyer from an inspection to a loan institution is considered seller's assist. So be cautious with that. You don't want to exceed your cap of seller's assist. Seller agrees to satisfy all the terms of buyer's proposal, or buyer and seller will enter into another mutual acceptable written agreement, Buyer accepts the property and agrees to release in paragraph 28 of this agreement, and the negotiation period ends. If no mutual acceptable agreement is reached, so by day 5, we haven't heard a word of that seller, they went underground. Or if the seller fails to respond during the negotiating period, so we know that's at 5 days, within 2 days, if not specified, following the end of the negotiating period, buyer will accept the property with the information stated in the report or terminate this agreement. Now, for me, on line 455, I changed the 2 to a 5. And you say, but why do you do that? Because inevitably, it's going to happen. These dates are going to fall on a holiday, 3-4 day weekend period. And everybody's losing their mind. They can't find everybody. And we get stuck with the 2 day. I personally change it to 5. You do as you wish. But if the end of the 5 days, if I don't hear anything coming from that seller's agent, I notify my buyer and say, what do you want to do? This guy went underground. I start the process already. Do you want out of this? And then they have to make a decision. I would have them fill out the termination and return a deposit money form and have it ready to go. Because if you hear nothing, you're going to have to email that over. I email it over actually at the end of day 5. There really is this 2-day lightning window. This whole inspection period is a 17-day cycle, but I like to move things along a little bit to make sure everybody's paying attention. Buyer wants out. They're not dealing with your hot mess. If buyer and seller do not reach a mutual acceptable written agreement and buyer does not terminate this agreement with written notice to the seller, you better put a big star next to this paragraph. Within the time allotted in paragraph 13B, 3B, buyer will accept the property and agree to release in paragraph 28 of this agreement. Ongoing negotiations do not automatically extend the negotiating period. If you do not get your buyers out within the time frame indicated, they're stuck with the property and all the bumps and bruises. That's why by the end of day 5, I'm dog with a bone. I'm moving forward. This is really bad when these dates fall out of place. You guys have got to pay serious attention to this. The next part in C talks about when there is an individual on-lot sewage disposal system that is defective. You're going to find that out in the home inspection if the property has private septic or sewage. I'm not going to go into detail about that because it's such a rare occurrence that we deal with it, but everything kind of falls along the same idea of timing, notification, response back. Okay? We don't want our buyers stuck with properties with bumps and bruises. Get them out. You can always go back in, right? Get them the hell out, and then we'll figure it out. All right? Any questions? No? You guys are good? You're not going to make any mistakes, right?
I have a question.
My lips to God's ear, no mistakes, okay? All right, guys, you have a fabulous holiday. Be safe.
Bye, Vicki.
Vicki
Bye,
is
Vic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.